I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June.
21st,
Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns.
No lifts.
The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses.
Oh, it's
Their
big enough that
microphones
that'll
will
be
only
able to
turned
see it.
on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National
Oh, that I
Constitution
didn't know.
Center. This
I
is
didn't
an
realize
intimate
there was no
setting for
audience.
2
Yeah,
candidates
just like
who have
Atlanta.
never met.
President
It
Trump
went
won
so
the
well
coin
last
toss.
time.
He chose to deliver the final closing
Stop
statement
calling
of the
him
evening.
president.
Vice
Oh, my
President
God.
Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President
Oh,
Kamala
shit.
Harris and
Here we
President
go.
Donald Trump.
They keep calling him president. Jesus Christ. Off to a great start. Do not shake. Do not shake.
She's
do
gonna
not
shake.
Nope.
Kamala
No.
Harris.
Oh, no, I'm glad that she did.
Welcome
I'm
to you
glad
both.
She
It's
had
wonderful
to,
have
I
you. It's
know,
an
but
honor
I
to have
hope
you
she
both
has
here tonight.
Purell
Good
back
evening.
there.
We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate.
That
but,
must be
I would like to
record
let
race
Vice President
baiting.
Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I'd love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear
Racism.
tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
Liar.
That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely.
you don't
I'm not going to
read.
read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
What's it now?
We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors,
Think you're an
my
idiot.
plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as
you
a country.
didn't,
It's
and
going to
name
make
one of
people
them.
want to be able to go and
Exactly.
work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up.
He's not the
Vice
president.
brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President
Not
Harris
many,
has
every
argued it'll mean higher
economist
prices on
alive.
gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
So he doesn't know what
I was
tariffs
the only
are.
president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration.
She's not
We are
president.
going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
Because he knows the price of any of those
people
things?
our
Give me a
country
fucking
are
break.
Absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
Ready on
First of
day
all,
one,
they
President
bought their
Kamala
chips
Harris.
from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
What is
Her father's a
Marxism?
Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy,
Yeah, like
too.
you.
Know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states.
She needs to nail this moment. I know she will.
Genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened.
Fucking lie.
Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal.
The madness
Kansas,
is that
the
these
vote was
moderators
somewhat
are allowing
liberal,
this to
much
go
more
on.
liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm
That
not
was
signing
Reagan,
a ban,
idiot.
and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call
Because
him a
of
boss,
his
he
Supreme
spends all his
Court
time on the
picks.
beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But
What
if I
is he
could just get a
talking
yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really
So
didn't.
he doesn't talk to him.
We don't have to discuss it because
Vice
she'd
President
never be
doesn't
able to
matter.
get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans.
He's still not
They
answering
taunted
whether
young
he'd sign it.
people and a lot of other people that had
he never
loans.
will.
They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women
insane.
of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the
doesn't know what
people
that
of
means.
America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been
good for
a
you.
leader. In fact, when they got a
Fertilization? IVF?
from the
The
Alabama
fertilization?
courts,
What's
so the
IV?
people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows
Leader.
it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF.
On
And the other thing,
fertilization?
you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question,
you
would you
could
veto?
do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor.
That's
former
not
governor
what
of
Roe v.
Virginia.
Wade said, you
The governor
fucking
of Virginia
fertilization
said, we
monster.
put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
Oh my God.
Spraying crop
We're going to
fields.
turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's
you
important to
fact check him?
Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill
is
would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have
He's
been
just gonna
personally
call her a
affected
liar after
by the
everything
surge
she
of
says.
fentanyl in
And
our
borders
country.
are.
That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
There you
And I
go.
will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your
There we go.
desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
There
President
you
Trump,
go.
on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there. And then
That's George
showing
Soros.
them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies.
smiling
We have the
'cause
biggest
he
rallies,
took
the
the
most
bait.
incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's
Pathetic
because
piece of
people
shit.
want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago.
Speaking of boredom.
And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country
to
by
go into
allowing
another
these
subject.
millions and millions of people to come into our country.
How many
and look
millions?
at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by
Are
it.
the only towns
in
he knows.
Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The
Oh, my
people that
God.
came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that
There we go.
live there. And
There we
this is
go.
what's happening in our country, and
There
it's
we
a
go.
shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again.
From a
She's
very
destroying
simple
this
man.
country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and
Holy
used
shit.
for food. So
Holy
maybe he said that,
shit.
and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But
television.
the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
He just
Again,
lost
the
the
Springfield
debate.
city manager says there's no evidence of that.
He
Vice
just lost
President
his
Harris, I'll let you
mind.
respond to the rest of what you've heard.
What little's left of it.
You talk about extreme.
He should just drop his pants right now.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt
I
Romney,
wanna marry her.
and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of
Or who
staff,
are
a
related to
four-star
him.
general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit.
Look at his
His
face.
former Secretary of
steaming.
Defense has said the nation,
going to
the Republic, would
explode.
never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They
fired
never
Dick
fired
Cheney,
one person.
Cheney?
They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got
Like
to know
dogs?
the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations
Like
anybody
COVID?
has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? They have done such a poor job.
Because you're
and they
full of
never
shit.
fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look how.
'Cause
look
they
at the
hire good
inflation.
people.
They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far.
And you lost by almost
In
8
fact,
million
I got
votes
more
still.
votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
You lost, you
Let me
loser.
continue on immigration. It
Please
was what
call
we
him a
wanted to talk
loser.
about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug
Cannibals.
dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the
Any
United States
34 count
and
felons?
told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've
'Cause you
taken
don't
their
live
criminals
there.
off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it. Because they're destroying the fabric of our
Destroying
country
the
by what they've done. There's never
The question
been
was
anything
to
done
walk
like
us
this
through
at
his
all. They've
plan, just to
destroyed the
remind folks
fabric
that
of
are
our
now
country.
lost in the haze.
Millions of people let in, and all over the
He
world.
doesn't have to answer
crime is
questions,
down
Danielle.
All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
No, it's
Despite
not.
their fraudulent
I think she's
statements that
gonna
they
get
made,
under his skin
crime
more.
in this country is
That's
through
all
the
she
roof.
needs to
And
do.
we have a new
Prosecutor
form of
Harris
crime. It's
is
called
in the
migrant
House.
crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump,
Oh.
as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris, I'll
FBI
give you the-
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities.
Everybody
they didn't
lies,
include the
except-
cities
Oh my
with the
God.
worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think
How about
this is
just
so
tell them to shut
rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Bitch.
And let's be clear, where each person
told you,
stands
he's gonna lose
on
his
the
fucking
issue
shit.
of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It looks
Excuse
so
me.
sad.
Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest
Oh
on
my
appeal.
God.
And you saw that with
He
the decision
looks
that came down
so
just recently from the
deranged.
Supreme Court. I'm
He
winning
is.
most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this
that what it's
country.
called?
They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the
Those are
Attorney
state.
General of New
Those are
York and the DA
DAs.
in New York.
Those are
Every
not-
one of those cases.
He
and
doesn't
then
know.
They say, oh,
He has no idea.
He's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my
No.
documents
Oh,
case?
God.
They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total
Okay,
victory.
prosecutor,
2 months
bring it
ago,
home.
was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used
we've
it
never had
to
a
try and
fucking
win an
criminal.
election. They're fake cases.
Run for
President Trump,
office.
thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization
Just
of the
say
Justice
he's
Department.
insane.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
We gotta
This is the
continue
one
here.
that
No.
weaponized, not
Don't
me.
let him.
She
Don't let him.
weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head
Oh.
because of the
shit!
things that they say
Oh,
about me.
shit!
They talk about
What?
democracy. I'm a threat to
What the
democracy. They're the threat to
she
democracy
better
with a
address
fake
that.
Russia,
She better
Russia,
address
Russia
that.
investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you
She
said
can't
you
let
wanted
that
to
go
ban
unchallenged.
fracking. Now
How can
you
they let
don't.
that go
You wanted
unchallenged?
mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is
Nobody's
that
perfect.
we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I
you
was.
were.
My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a
Psychopath.
fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many
Liar.
billions. And when
Failure.
people see it, they are even surprised. So
Loser.
we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very
He got that
wrongly,
backwards.
very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12
we're
and
laughing,
probably
but it's
14
not
or
at that.
15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now.
Oh.
You don't mind,
Oh.
please.
Oh. He's stealing
sound
everybody's
familiar?
lines.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison.
What?
This is a radical left liberal that would do this.
She
She
sounds
wants to
very
confiscate
talented.
your guns, and she will never allow fracking in
I didn't know she was
Pennsylvania.
a surgeon.
If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion.
A
So
sentence.
I
Finish
got the
a
oil business
sentence.
going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher because you're talking about
What is he
3.5
talking
years ago.
about?
They
Nobody
got
knows.
it up to
Prices
where I
going up
was
the roof.
because they had no
Also,
choice because the
what is
prices of
that?
energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the
No,
election,
that's
the
not
day
what
after that
happened.
election,
Biden-
they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get
Back
some
to
energy
solar.
to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but
Oh,
they take 400,
President Trump.
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy
Oh,
and the role
yes.
of a president in a moment of crisis.
Do we all know
Mr.
that?
President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to
No.
the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
It's not.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace.
Hear that, Fraternal Order of Police?
This group of people that have been treated so badly, I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm
Sir,
surprised you're not talking about the border
this
yet. That's
is
because
an
she
Arby's.
knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted?
What about them?
When are these people from
Look at her
countries
face.
all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of
January
it.
But let me
But
just-
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted?
Are there moderators
Or in
here?
Seattle. They went into Seattle. They took over a big
They're like
percentage of the
mannequins.
city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just
When
ask
are
you,
you
might
going to
ask
be
her that question.
you were the
jailed?
president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election.
Thank you,
Is there
David.
anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C.
He's not
and
answering.
The mayor put it back in
What?
writing, as you know. I said, you know,
He's never
this
wrong.
is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They
Lies.
rejected
Liar.
me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter
He's
has
not
a tape of her
asking
saying
about that.
she is fully responsible for what happened.
What?
They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about
Oh,
former Speaker
yes.
Pelosi. But I
Thank
do want
you,
Vice President
David.
Harris to
Finally.
respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator.
was a
I
senator.
was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's
Bring
capital.
it home.
You should just take off
To
this pants. now.
desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
Amen.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed
What?
our energy business.
there
That
we
was
go.
where bloodbath was. Also,
No.
on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham,
There's a
Sean
vi-
Hannity, Jesse, all of these
Laura
people. They covered
Laura
it. If
Ingram's
they go
debunking?
An extra sentence,
it.
they will
There's
see
a
it was
video.
perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border. How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do.
Doesn't
and I
he
would
get
be very
bored?
proud to do it. I would
I
say we
don't
would
think
both
so.
leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C.
Whoa.
and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the
She's
right to
vice
do it. They don't
president.
need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the
He's
United
lost
States,
his
you'll get him
shit.
out of bed.
Whatever was
you'll wake him
left.
up at
Yeah.
4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill,
Maybe he
that
wants
the
to refer
border
to the
is closed, all he has to do is
Constitution.
say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people,
I wanna-
unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus. Truth
How did they just
in
slide
these
by
times
this
that
shit?
we're living in. Mr. President,
It's
for
actually
3.5
better.
years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look,
Master of
there's
humor.
so much proof. All you have to
Whisker
do
is
look
very
at it. And
sarcastic.
they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever
Biden got
gotten. I was told
81.
if I got 63, which was what I
Math.
got in
He
2016,
can't do arithmetic.
you can't be beaten.
Maths.
The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls.
you're right.
We need, and we have to have it. We
Walls.
have to have borders, and we have to have good elections.
Tim Walz.
Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants
Our
coming
elections
in,
are
they're trying to
bad.
get them to vote.
Got
They
it.
can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come
This
into
is
our country.
insane.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker, we didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said
They
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have
60
standing.
times.
A
Let me tell you,
technicality.
David
Can
is
you
doing better
imagine
than
a
anyone
system
has done
where
before.
This is
an
amazing.
election
Took him a
doesn't
while,
have
but he's
standing?
got-
The
he got there.
president
He
of the
warmed up.
United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you do
Not
a
every
special
case,
on it.
you dickhead.
I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many
Please
facts
do.
and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris,
Thank
you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the
Thank
United
you.
States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
There you
I have
go.
talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you.
I
and
want to
they say
memorize
we're a
every word of
disgrace.
this.
And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men. They call him a
God,
strong man. He's a tough person.
Strong man,
Smart.
tough. He's
Prime
tough.
Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the
Dictator.
whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said,
Because of Viktor Orban.
You need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I
Speaking
don't like
of
to use the word afraid,
endorsements.
but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't
I
in that
thought you meant
debate,
you.
he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her.
Wow.
But he got 14 million
Wow.
votes. They threw him out.
This
She got
is
0 votes.
insane.
Wow.
When she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more
Yeah,
to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people
He
when you
holds
add
your
it up.
leash.
Far worse than people understand what's going on
No threat
over
of it.
there.
That's why you were
But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden,
telling
she
Zelensky
hates
he had to do
Israel.
you a
She
favor.
wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority
She
party
met with him
of hers. She wanted to
afterwards.
go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one.
What?
She
What
hates Israel.
predictions
At
is
the
he good
same
at?
time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel.
Jared's going to turn it
Israel
into
will
a
be
parking
gone.
lot, so.
It would have never happened.
She hates
Iran
Jews
was
and Arabs.
broke
Okay,
under Donald
Donald.
Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror.
Terror.
They had no money. It was a
Terror.
big story, and
Is
you
that
know,
like
you covered it
from
very
Gone
well,
with the
actually.
Wind?
They had no money
No, it's
for
just
terror.
Queen's accent
They were
coming through.
broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now
Really?
what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I
Sir,
will get that
answer the
settled and
questions.
fast, and I'll get the war with
How?
Ukraine and
How?
Russia ended.
How?
If
Doesn't
I'm
have to say.
president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming
How?
He was asked what he would say to
President Harris says
Netanyahu.
you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator
and
on
wrong.
day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
Oh, shit!
And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I
What?
hope she wins. And I think he meant it. Because what he's
lying.
gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak
Side-eye.
and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Holy cow. This is like fantasy
The
debate.
ABC News
Right? It's like
presidential debate.
band camp for debates because
I just,
we're getting exactly what we want. Like, seriously, like we've been saying all of this for years, but we needed somebody saying it to his face, pushing his fucking buttons. And okay, I'm going to start and then I want you guys to go. I mean, the whole thing is brilliant. So it's very difficult to isolate the most brilliant things, but we don't have to. We could talk about all of it. But to me, the most effective thing she's doing, which deflects all kinds of criticisms, illegitimate and legitimate, she's speaking to the issues. No, sorry. She's dismantling him in a very measured, serious way. And then she's pivoting to what she's going to do. And every fucking thing she's saying, Danielle, is this.
It is, I mean, this is surgical, right?
Yeah.
The dismantling, Mary, that is accurate. She is surgically going in. It is like peeling back the skin and just putting under everything that you possibly can. The weak and wrong, and saying that over and over again, that I talk to world leaders all over the world and they are laughing at you. I mean, Mary, it is as if she sat and listened to your mashed potato story and said, I'm going to do you one better. Like, I know that the thing that you hate most is embarrassment, and I'm going to embarrass the fuck out of
And
you
humiliation.
and humiliate you on national television, and do it with a smile. This is a master fucking class.
Yeah. And Jen, it's like she's mocking him. She's humiliating him. She's speaking substantively on issues. And she's doing it in a way that's actually not hostile, aggressive, angry. She's just like, hey, man, what the fuck? I mean, and that's really effective because she's not yelling. She's not overstating anything. Anyway, so your thoughts.
So you know how we often talk about how difficult it is to deal with Donald because it's just this fire hose of fuckery? Yeah. Well, she is the mirror image of that, offering up a fusillade of finesse. It's hard for me, and I've been taking notes, to actually pinpoint all of the brilliance. And the framework you have provided, Mary, is the perfect one to say that she was able to, and Danielle, pull back the skin, get under him, but also get her points across. And I absolutely loved when she would almost agree with him on the stuff that he shouldn't be proud of. Like, this is your Supreme Court that you handpicked. And she called it the Trump abortion bans. Right. And I know that you noticed that, but those details, and it didn't, she knew to say it. Nothing seemed staged. Of course, she's prepared. I also love how she said words like, she knew that she has to nail the economy stuff, and they started with that. So she said things like, Goldman's, just the name dropping, Goldman Sachs, Wharton, Nobel laureates. And then she said he exploded the deficit. Mm-hmm. And also talking about, she didn't try to say you're an idiot about tariffs. She doesn't need to. Everyone will. But she did say, that he bought chips from China. I mean, she threw stuff at him that he doesn't even know how to respond to because his people probably did it. But I think my favorite, besides how she handled Charlottesville, which I thought was incredibly brilliant. Mm-hmm. I was just almost crying, literally, because I couldn't believe that she was able to do that and talk about anti-Semitism and the Proud Boys. But I think my favorite fucking thing of the whole night was when she said, I invite you to go to one of his rallies.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that whole part,
oof.
I mean, I have the chills just thinking about it. I mean, I will tell you that this is, they often look, I was an English major, as you know, Mary, and sometimes they would have us look at Queen Elizabeth's speeches. Like when she was trying to summon up the fight against the Spanish Armada.
English language or English literature? What in God's name were you looking at Queen Elizabeth's speeches for? But anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
Well, because I'm really interested in...
Oh, wait, sorry.
Tonight.
Fuck,
We're
we
going
gotta
to continue
go.
here, and I want to turn to
We'll
the
get
war
there.
in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that?
He's
And I
going to
want
say
to
it
ask you a
never
very
would have
simple
happened.
question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more. Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III.
Be afraid,
we have a president
everybody.
that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war?
Thank you, David.
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and
You won't
just
answer
get
the
it
question.
done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Thank you.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up.
Yep.
And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
Hello.
I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
Yep.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour.
He's going to need
I
to
wanted
respond.
her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But
Because his
eventually,
goal
he's
is to
got a
make
thing
Putin
that
happy.
Other people don't
started
have.
the
He's got
war.
nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them. And
Yeah, no
maybe
one
it hasn't been
thinks
that
about that.
threatening. But he does have that.
He's
we don't even like to
threatening
talk
us
about.
on behalf of
Nobody likes to
Putin right
talk
now.
about it. But just so you
Correct.
understand, they sent her to negotiate
Holy
peace before
fuck.
this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war.
No.
Because everything they said was weak and stupid.
No.
They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President-
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our
There's
country.
no
But let me
such
tell you
thing.
something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing
Why
I've
did they
ever
turn the
seen.
mic on if
He
he's
got
not allowed
these
to talk?
countries, the 28 countries at
It's
the time,
good.
to pay up.
It's
He said,
good,
I've
because
never
otherwise
seen. He's
we
the
don't
head of
hear.
NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it.
Yeah,
he
'cause
said
that's
it
how it
was one
works.
of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you.
But
I
we
wanna
need
turn
to see what
Afghanistan.
happens when
It
he
came up in the
talks
first
without
hour
being
of the
able to be
debate,
heard.
And we witnessed a poignant
would
moment today on
put
Capitol
pressure
Hill,
on him.
honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban.
Yep.
The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David.
Yep.
A
When?
place
All of that fact.
storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this
What day?
former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and
September
responsibility
11th.
of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with
thank
the
you.
Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And
not it.
Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems.
She's
and he
trying
said, why
really
do you
hard
send me
not
a
to
picture
laugh.
of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't
so
have lost the
stupid.
soldiers. We
He's
wouldn't have
so
left
stupid,
many
it's
Americans
painful.
behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they
You didn't
blew
start.
it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The
Which this
agreement
didn't they do?
was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I wanna move
And
on.
these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia
Putting you in the
attacked
White House.
Ukraine,
Well, that was
because
the
they
most
saw how
embarrassing.
incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to
contempt
race and politics in
personified.
this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
Okay.
I want to ask a bigger
need to
picture
hear.
question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't,
Oh,
and I don't
shit.
care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
He's
I'm
I don't
so
know. I
generous.
don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll
What?
say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's
What?
okay. Either one was okay with me.
What the
That's up to
fuck?
her. That's up to her.
He's
Vice
insane.
President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he had owned land, he
Slumlord.
owned
You say slumlord.
buildings, and he was investigated
His father
because
did.
he refused to rent
He was
property to black families.
he was working there at that
Let's
time.
remember, this is the same individual who
I
took out
understand.
Bring it
a
up.
full-page ad in the New York
Exonerated.
Times
5.
Thank
Yep.
you.
calling for the execution of 5 young
Innocent.
black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central
Innocent.
Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. Want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country. And they come up with things like what she just said. going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty.
Oh,
And I
my
said,
God.
well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But
DNA
this is a
evidence,
person
asshole.
That has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago.
Called patterns.
Because there's nothing now. I built one of the
What?
greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our
Oh,
economy.
good. She's
They
gotta
have no
say the
idea what a good
economy stuff.
economy is. Their oil policies,
Yeah.
every single policy.
That's not what the
And
numbers
remember
say.
this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't
I
get
don't
away
know
with
the
that.
gentleman. That's what he would say.
Respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Because
One
she's
who
a lot younger.
believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
Love
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a
Oh, my
plan
God.
to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
what
her
an
plan
idiot.
is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump,
multiple
this
Keep going.
is now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You
Oh,
have
come
long
on, man.
vowed to repeal and replace
That's
the
really
Affordable
unfair.
Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running,
3
do you
weeks,
have a plan?
he said.
And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today.
45 million
And what I
Americans.
said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace
Working
it.
on
But
things.
remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came
This
up,
is such
they
bullshit.
wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration.
None
We
of
read
them
about
is
the bad
voting
ones.
for
We had
you.
some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But
What?
it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than
He's had
Obamacare,
8 years
then
I
to
will
figure
not
this
give you
out.
do it.
any
But
details
until
about
then,
it,
I'd run
however.
it as good as it can be run.
Well,
So
as
just
well.
yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan.
Oh, my
I'm not
God.
president right now. But if we come up with something. I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have
Such
to
as?
do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice
Of course
President
we
Harris,
will.
in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that
Good.
the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop
hate when
with the
Democrats do
continuous
that.
lying about this stuff.
Yeah.
As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being...
this is gonna get him.
You don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first
This
time
is so
Medicare to
good.
negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year.
He looks sad.
And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past its
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of...
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going.
Wasn't he the
And you know
final
what?
vote before
Yeah.
his death?
We can do much better
That
than
made it
Obamacare.
happen?
Much less
Okay.
money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you.
Not
We have
true.
another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and
going
that's
along?
climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy
What do we
to the
call
point that we
resting
are
face?
opening up
It's not resting bitch
factories
face,
around the world. Donald
but
Trump
it's
said he
something.
was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also
It's resting
proud of the
incredulity
endorsement of
face.
the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people.
Germany.
What they have given to China is
Norway.
unbelievable.
Zimbabwe.
But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina
hate
or any other
unions.
place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know,
If nothing?
Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son,
So
they
why
get
is the
all this money
UAW
from Ukraine. They
endorsing
get all this money from
Kamala
all
then?
of these different
Hunter
countries.
Biden.
And then you wonder, why
Has
is
he
he so
confused
loyal
himself
to
with
this one,
Egypt?
that one,
'Cause
Ukraine,
Egypt
China?
gave him 10
Why is he-
million.
Why did he
That's
get
right.
$3.5 million
I think so.
from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did he get?
What?
Why did she pay him $3.5 million?
Maybe you
This
should
is
fucking
a crooked
ask him,
administration, and
because
they're selling our
Harris
country
is
down
not
the
Biden.
tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of
Okay.
our candidates. in
Thank
historic
you.
Caucus
Okay.
ABC News presidential debate. from
Listen,
Philadelphia.
David,
Back in a moment.
This
Has
guy,
done great.
no, he's done okay, but he's done great compared to the rest of them. But you know, so much has been allowed to slide. But yes, thank you, David, for actually doing your job some of the time. It's actually been very instructive. Donald Trump, I don't mean this. I don't want to speak clinically, so I'll speak locally. He's out of his fucking mind. Okay. And anybody who discusses this debate without pointing that out is lying to you, first of all.
Well,
Secondly, he is grasping at straws. Everything he says practically is a lie. And that's the stuff that actually is coherent. The rest of it's an incoherent mess. Danielle, how could anybody come out of this debate? Come out of this debate thinking that this was not an absolute routing of this insane traitor by this brilliant woman who is going to be our next president.
I mean, we'll see what the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and Reuters and Politico come up with their headlines, because I'm pretty sure that much like we watched last week in his speech at the Economic Club, that they inferred all of the shit that he said. I'm pretty sure that they're going to imbue this with saying that it was somehow a tie. Right? Like that's what corporate mainstream media will do. But I think that if you are, I would guarantee, I don't know the numbers yet, but this is probably the most watched debate like ever, because of how it was hyped up. So the good news is that the millions of Americans that tuned in for this saw this with their own eyes. This is not going to be up for interpretation, up for, the sane washing that the media has been doing. Like, I ask you a question, you go off the rails, you say she's stupid, doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, it's beyond. It's beyond.
Yeah.
We couldn't have wanted better, frankly.
No,
It's all I have to say.
honestly,
we
I
could
can't
not
even-
have dreamt of better.
Yeah, we could have actually that everybody had debated him like this. That would have been better. But for tonight, Jesus, it's like it is like a fantasy of a debate. Jen,
I promise not to return to Queen Elizabeth I's speech, although that
Thank you
is
so
where
much.
I left off. But what I want to say is, my proxy or my litmus test for if it's going well is that I did not have to go upstairs and get any more M&Ms. In other words, my nervous needing something sweet because I was freaking out, which is why I ate, I think, a whole giant thing of Twizzlers at the Atlanta debate. That is not my mood. And I think I feel right now like we're going to be disappointed with how the press covers this. However, the internet is forever. And these clips are going to go viral and everyone's going to see them. And the kinds of people who we need, the only people who are undecided right now aren't watching the news anyway. They're getting their news on YouTube or TikTok. And we need to flood the zone with this BS, especially when he lost his shit when she said, I invite you to go to one of his rallies. I mean, that was the moment. And then she kept at it the comments about the world leaders laughing at him. I mean, Danielle, I would just look to see like where, between you and I and like whether we were snapping, we're like wrapped. I mean, I just like, I don't.
Yes, you guys are definitely more demonstrative than I am. This is
I am so fangirling.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Well, I do. Because
I know I've seen,
but
it's lovely. It's
but
wonderful.
like I don't know
listen,
how.
Seriously, watching you guys watch this gives me joy.
Let me tell you, Queen Elizabeth I, though, since I
okay.
No,
you
it was a very short
You
speech.
just lost me again.
Because she was a woman and had she had to fight against the male stereotypes, so the whole virgin queen. But she wrapped herself. Oops.
Okay, we're coming. Sorry,
Queen Elizabeth.
Nobody wants you to talk about Queen Elizabeth, apparently. All right, closing statements. Here we go.
Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about.
He has no closing statement.
Why hasn't she
They
done
did
it?
create jobs,
She should
you
leave right
dickhead.
now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it.
Maybe read
because you
Article
believe
1.
in things
I'm
that
sorry,
the
Article
American
2 of
people
the
don't believe in.
Constitution.
You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year they were back to building normal energy
What?
plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country
When
for
you
the
don't
sake
prepare.
of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation.
I have a question.
We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all
What's he
over the
gonna do
world. All
for
over the
people?
world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call
You're right,
me.
he hasn't offered
We're
anything.
laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have
You
wars
don't.
going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on
Oh, we
with
don't.
Russia and Ukraine. We're
Russia.
going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other
No
because
wonder.
of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire
He would love a war.
military.
He's a nihilist.
She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done
Is she
to
in
our
charge or
country,
is she
and
not in
maybe
charge?
toughest of all
Exactly.
is
He doesn't
allowing
know.
millions of people to come into our country. Many of them
Country,
are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history
thing.
of our country.
He's so
President
boring.
Trump, thank
Boring,
you.
boring,
And
boring.
Boring.
Is our ABC News presidential
Yawn.
debate from here
Okay,
in
guys.
Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center.
We
I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S.
are going to
and all
move
over the world,
over
and from all of us here at ABC
to our
News.
other.
Good night.
I think Mercedes needs to drop the link in. Sorry.
And that concludes the ABC
Guys,
presidential debate. C-SPAN's
you're
coverage
watching,
of it continues here tonight.
Love
with
you guys.
viewer
We're gonna
reaction
drop the link
and
in for
reaction
you,
on the
so you know where to go
ground
for the
from candidates'
post
support. As you can
debate
see,
commentary, and
reporters
I'm trying to
swarming
find it for
there
you.
in the spin
Jen?
room. Let's go down
I can't.
into the
There,
spin
we need to
room at
mute
Philadelphia
the main feed
Convention
because
Center
I
and
can't
listen
hear
in.
you.
She's moving in the right direction, showing
So I'm not
up
sure
in the
what's
right
going
parts
on.
of our state.
It's a spin
in
room,
order
but
to
I
make the
don't.
case.
Thank you, Mercedes. Okay, that's much better. So the link is going to be in the chat for our post-debate analysis. We'll be joined. Jen and I will be joined there by other nerds. I think we have plenty to say, whether anybody else is there or not. So we will see you there imminently. Ciao.